Hi, a very warm welcome to everybody to today's webinar on moving over the millennials and welcoming the centennials. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Dan Scott. We are very thankful to Mr. Dan for having this webinar for us today from USA. In today's presentation, if you have any questions, you can post it in the questions panel and we would be very happy to take them. Now I hand over the presentation to Mr. Dan to take it forward from here.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone at GemAtlas and everyone that's watching, whether that be live or perhaps you're watching it at another time. I think you'll find this presentation enlightening and maybe a bit different than you're accustomed to in a traditional business-to-business situation with gemstones and precious metal and fine jewelry and watches. But nonetheless, we think that it'll be very informative. And I'd like to start out by saying that I should be accompanied by a very, very important individual, someone that is my friend and colleague for well over a decade. Her name is Cynthia, and she's a little under the weather, so I hope that we'll be able to put together a co-host situation. She's actually the person that was responsible for making all this happen. So I feel that I really wish to introduce her, even though she's not with us at the moment. She's responsible for portions of this content, and again, my go-to source for anything and everything that has to do with gemology and metals and anything within jewelry and the watch industry at large. She's had over 25 years of this experience, and she's editor-in-chief of 4 different prestigious jewelry magazines, and also an active member and editor for multiple global organizations as well. What I find so interesting about Cynthia is that she's not just a writer, and she's not just the most well seasoned and the most traveled, but she absolutely is the type of editor that she takes the experience of what she witnesses and then she transposes that into text and visuals and tells the story like no one really else can. And those stories come from gem mines of Thailand, Brazil, Kenya, Tanzania. It's all over the place. I actually remember flying her down to a place in Montana when I was working for Scott K at the time, and we had just introduced palladium to the market, and she was one of the first people out of the plane to go deep into the mines. Really an amazing individual. She runs a site called gemscene.com, and she probably wouldn't let me do all this if she was actually here. So my little plug to Cynthia, Gemscene is an absolutely go-to source for anything and everything that has to do with precious gems. And 3 words that come to mind, if I may say so again, the experiential with Cynthia is absolutely comes to mind. The coverage is always expansive. It's a wide array of things that you ordinarily wouldn't see or hear about unless you traveled as extensively as she did. And the coverage is also eclectic, I find. And through Cynthia, I was able to write stories of my own. And actually, the past cover, this is Solitaire, a magazine that just last month, it was the cover story on what's happening within the jewelry industry. Multiple branding stories that have to do more lately with social media, but always on jewelry and watches within the category and how that relates to people. A little bit more of a snapshot, just if you don't know who I am. I've really been privileged to have, like I said, I don't say the career is over because it's a lot more years to go, hopefully. But I was one of the founders of QVC pre-launch. I stayed there for 8 years. When I left to pursue luxury endeavors. I worked with Herberts on the launch of Allure, the fragrance from Chanel, VeriSign, which is a internet company. When I joined Scott K as chief marketing officer, I was there for 10 years. And we launched Cobalt, Palladium, did a host of different things with multiple gemstones. If you want to learn more about me, you're welcome to go to my site or info@danscott.com, or just Google my name. You'll see a bunch of things that are there. It's been a very interesting 15 years altogether now within jewelry, the majority of which were chief marketing officer with Scott K. I then left to go on to pursue licensing with companies you wouldn't ordinarily associate with jewelry, Hershey's, for example, or Hasbro. These are not jewelry companies, but they wanted to take their name and elevate their status within a licensed category. And so I was responsible for creating the chocolate kisses that were actually brown diamonds in various metals, or the gold and sterling you see here with the black diamonds in the launch that now Stellar has distributed. So all over the board with things that are have to do with luxury and mass. Started a company called Lux Licensing recently, and Lux Licensing takes all the information that I did and learned from World Trade Jewelers on the licensing side, as well as the heritage and my experience on the fine jewelry side, and also bridging fashion. The reason I bring all this up is that now you've kind of got a good overview of what I've done, hopefully, and that I've had multiple touch points, be the mass market with QVC, to the fine jewelry market of Scott K, to the fashion markets, to licensing brands. And through the way, I've met a host of different people and a lot of different talents. And what I've learned is that there's always more to learn. Right. So part of today is hopefully me being able to relay my information through the years to you and answer questions that will help you. So whether you are a buyer of any jewelry or loose stones, if you're a seller of loose stones or of any form of jewelry, if you're a designer, if you're a retailer, no matter where you are in the world, every single individual must, in my opinion, know branding and marketing to just at least the 101 level. So we'll start with that, if I may. What is the difference between branding and marketing? You've heard the two words together, but I think we need to clarify that. And here is the difference. Branding is a promise. It's something that it should be inherent to any product or service. Think of it as the soul of something. So, I mean, I've got a pen right here, all right? This pen, if this pen was branded, it would have an essence to it. It would have words that are top of mind when you think of the brand of the pen, how effectively it writes, and how it looks in your hand. All of these nuances make up that. There's the personality of the product. That's the brand. The marketing is the implementation of how to get it to market. It's the pricing, it's the positioning, it's the 4Ps. It's all the things that the nuts and bolts that take the tactical strategy and the essence of the brand and move it to market. So it's a mind to market concept. In my opinion, you really can't have any product, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether you're selling a business-to-business widget or if you're selling a luxury automobile or anything in between. The reality is that the brand itself has to be apparent. It can be a part of a person if you're promoting an individual, or a product or service. So hopefully that brings some clarity between the definition of branding and marketing. It is a big difference, and it's one that I think people should be aware of. Here's another quick one. You've heard of demographics, of course. And what are demographics? They're just a way to segment out an audience. So no matter who you're selling to, you should be considering the end user. Everyone is a consumer. You, whoever you are watching, you are a consumer. You may not be thinking in that mindset when you've got your tray and you're showing off your rubies or whatever it might be to the buyer, at some chain or something of this nature. However, at the end of the day, everyone is a consumer. And if we think along those lines, demographics shift to psychographics. Psychographics are a way of better analyzing the individual. So we're not just talking about an age range, a salary range, a geographical range. Clearly, these are all important things that must be known about the end user. And you should be thinking about this, again, whether you're selling B2B and or B2C, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all consumers in some way, shape, or form. And we all have the same mentality to buy, what triggers us to buy. Psychographics go deeper than just where you live, how much money you make, how old you are, what sex you are, what sexual preference you have, all those things combined. It's just, those are the platforms, the cornerstones. Psychographics break into the why. Who is this person? What do they do? What do they like to do? Again, I'll reference, let's say, a stone buyer. A stone buyer might have a propensity to be going towards their birthstone, let's say, if they have an obvious interest there. Perhaps they're big on trends and they're always reading WWD or W Magazine or Vogue. And so their buying interests are more in tune with what they believe is trending or what they're being told is trending. Understanding the why of why someone buys goes into the drill down of psychographics. It's a whole different conversation, but you may hear me reference them So I thought it was important to define what psychographics and demographics are. Now, the other three, and these are 5 bullet points you may have seen in your email, if indeed you signed in prior to when you were hopefully wanting to see this webinar. What I'm going to offer you is a link. It's there on your screen. It's tinyurl.com/gemscene. And if you go to that specific domain, it'll take you right to the story, Move Over Millennials, Hello Centennials. And that will help define, if you are interested in learning about the difference between millennials that we all know and love. We've heard the name more times than we probably care to admit. And then centennials are the younger group behind them. This will make up together the most powerful buying group in the history of man. We know of no other groups that are smarter. They're born with a cell phone in their hand, savvy, are articulate, and the ability to question, but question on not just logic, but on group consensus, which is what online is really all about. You'll find that these people are going online to your website if you're a retailer. They're going to your online store before they enter your actual store, if they enter your actual store. So there's so much to learn about that group, but again, I would defer you to this one story because we're going to be talking about a little bit more of a focused interest, I believe, for the people that are watching this, and that has to do with the gemstone preference in type, size, color, and the why behind those things from centennials to millennials. And with that, we'll get this thing kicked off. So, all right, so who are these people and why are they important to you? And again, why am I using the word psychographics? We really want to know the why behind reaching tomorrow's consumer today. Right? So this does not mean that you have to create focus groups or try to read everything under the sun in marketing books to understand the profile of these individuals. However, you should know some nuances. You should know what they're interested in buying and what they are buying. You see, because if you know this critical information, you'll be able to sell more of those things. And the buyers, I would think, would be much more in respect of what you have to offer because you've done some mild research to better understand why certain colors, why certain types of gemstones, why certain cuts, certain sizes are fitting into different platforms that they are buying now. And the great news is they are buying now. This is not a group that is sitting around and trying to figure out, how to make ends meet because they're making more money every year. Think about this. A millennial, if you think millennial or at the top of your head, you might think, okay, this is a group that's in their 20s. They once were. Every year they age. Within the next 5 years, a large percentage of millennials will be 40 and over. They're thinking about their golden years and their retirement years and buying their first house if they haven't gotten that already. Most of them are in committed relationships if they're not married. And millennials don't have as much propensity to marry, but they do live together with people. They're basically, it's like a marriage. They're buying jewelry, but they're buying different types of jewelry. They're buying precious metal jewelry. Did you know that they are buying diamonds, natural and man-made, but more on the inclination to be purchasing natural? So many variables there in the psychographics of millennials. Centennials are the power force, the younger group that's right behind them, that isn't listening or getting advice or even caring of the advice of millennials. They're forging their own ground. And they're doing so in a world that is very complicated, obviously, and yet offers them many things. All these type of things are going to be covered in this presentation, mostly from a top mountain view anyhow, of what they like, what they don't like, why they like it, and how they're getting their message across. So again, no matter what part of the jewelry industry that you happen to come from, whatever you are trying to sell, whatever you're trying to buy, there's a colorful change that is amongst us now. And let me give you one great example of this. Millennials are shopping for engagement rings that are not your typical solitaire or halo 1 carat, 2 carat round with a 14 karat white gold. Those days are morphing into a much more colorful, much more personalized, and much more innovative look for both men and women. But on the engagement ring side, obviously we're talking women now. What you're seeing right there, actually, that image is coming from the editor of Vogue. And I believe that it was she was in the UK. And this is actually, it's her hand, it's her engagement ring. She selected this. Now, Vogue is still the fashion Bible. So when the editor, whatever wherever the magazine is heralding from, in the situation in the UK, Vogue UK, when the editor in chief from Vogue is saying, "Hey, I just got this beautiful engagement ring that is anything like what you would ordinarily see," it makes people sit up and take notice. And it's not just that one publication. This is globally, and I'm going to give you now some situations and some things you might be able to relate to a little bit more if you're in India, for example. So India's e-commerce market, we probably have all read the numbers. 22 billion by 2018 is the last estimate. But the CEO from Carrot Lane, which from my understanding is the largest Indian online jeweler, is taking color, demographics, and psychographics from Centennials and Millennials and bridging them together in a way that really makes the market sparkle. And they're not alone. Bluestone, another huge platform, obviously, online, especially in India. Look at what they're doing here. They are taking video components, specifically with colored gemstones. They're not doing this with everything. This happens to be a page that I recorded from this, and there's a few items that they did movement with. But look closer. This is more than just video. They're giving young people the opportunity to try the jewelry on. Try this design at home or office. You see this? Tiffany's is absolutely on top of their game. They created a concierge service online and mobile specifically to court more young people into their store from a destination standpoint. They wanted to know more about them in advance, and they found that out through their concierge service, through an app that they created to actually have people schedule time and get questions answered in advance before they even meet anyone in person, in some cases, if they even meet the person. This is where India, in my opinion, is advanced above the United States, above China, above many other countries, because they're doing things that are more proactive and forward-thinking in some respects, and we could all learn from that. We're going to see how this morphs in the next few years, but it's already starting to have an impact on their online sales and also the retention of these individuals. And that's obviously critical. Who wouldn't want that? So the new word in luxury, I don't know if you've heard this before, but I'm happy to bring it to you today. And the word is demi-fine. Not semi-fine, demi-fine. Think of a demigod, right? This is a very unique word that deals with a very unique category that is advancing incredibly so, and it is worldwide. So I promise you, if you haven't heard the phrase or the term, the word demi-fine before, you will now, because it is exploding onto the world in a very, very big way. What is demi-fine? Demi-fine, best described or best defined, I suppose, is a hybrid. It's a form of jewelry in precious metal traditionally, but more of a dainty, refined look that adds non-precious materials, right? So this has been done in the past with expensive watches that actually are made with rubber wristbands. Think of that concept of taking something that's a precious metal with a non-precious stone, for example, or a precious stone with a non-precious metal, blending them together. The reason why this is so important is this is the key to what was bridge, right? Using another term in jewelry, the consumers never related to, never should. Bridge has always been blurred, at least in the past 5 to 8 years, it's been blurred over what is fine jewelry, what is not fine jewelry. Oh, well, we have bridge. Okay. Yeah, consumers didn't relate to it, and merchandisers didn't really know how to work it and work it from an in-case standpoint, a window standpoint, an advertising standpoint. So enter demi-fine. Demi-fine is that new bridge. Okay. It's not costume. It's not fine. It is the in-between. And it's the in-between known of variances of price points. And I'm going to play a little piece of video that might speak to that. So maybe that gave you a little more of a presence, a bit more of the brand essence, if you will, of what DemiFine is. Um, when you look at searches, you can go to Google Trends. You're welcome to do this yourself. And you type in DemiFine with or without the hyphen, and you'll notice that there's key spikes in predictable times of the year. Here on this graph, we can see in July, there was a story that came out, pretty sizable story. Most recently, J. Crew just entered into a big to-do over DemiFine jewelry, and that there's another spike that goes past us, the dates here. But if you notice, holiday, end of 2017, November, December, clearly because of the holidays, and people were searching jewelry, but they weren't just searching jewelry. They were searching DemiFine and DemiFine jewelry. And again, Valentine's Day, no surprise. It'll happen again on Mother's Day. It'll happen again at graduation time periods in the US and through the world. It will happen again and again as people become more familiar with it. The reason why this is such an important word for you and why it needs to be underlined within this webinar is that here's another example of a word that you may not have known about. But if you do know about it, which you do now, and you're able to apply it to your business, it has to create a better wealth, a newfound road of opportunity, new inroads for financial success, because you're speaking the language of today's shopper. And for the first time in jewelry for quite some time that I can recall, this word, being the hybrid that it is not just for consumers. It's for sellers and it's for buyers, and it joins them all together. So when a consumer searches, as they now can do on Saks.com, Saks Fifth Avenue site, Saks Fifth Avenue just added DemiFine to their navigation. And if you can see here from this Google search, there's 5.7 million results. Okay, so it's important to be on top of trends and understanding what's happening, but it's the why. Why is this happening? So you know the word DemiFine. That's great. What does it do for you? The more you learn about DemiFine, the more you'll be able to see how it applies to not only the demographics we spoke of and the psychographics of Centennials and Millennials, but to your business. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. I'm about numbers. A marketing guy, everything to me surrounds that are figures, right? So it has to do with the percentages of things. And recently there was a great poll that took about 5,000 individuals that were in the millennial age range. So it would be right up to was 22 to about, I believe it was till 39 or 38. Of course, they're aging every year, but this was done about 6 months ago. And there were key questions that were asked that I'd like to relate to you because they do have to do with luxury purchases and things that are associated with self-purchasing of jewelry as well as gifting of jewelry. Here's one of the questions. What are the main reasons you're willing to spend money on high-end fashion or luxury items? 19.7% said they would like to treat themselves. And by the way, of that percentage, I believe it was 98% were female that were saying that. But that number is also shifting in different markets depending on what the item is. For example, gold watches right now are trending very hot in New York metro area and San Francisco, Miami for males, right? But they're also self-purchasers. In this specific category, it was more females that responded to that. But you can tell that whether it's high quality or treating themselves, they are interested in luxury. Don't think that millennials are this cheap group that don't have any sense of luxury or wanting it or have an aspiration, because that is absolutely, completely, and utterly wrong. And if you don't believe any of these survey results that we didn't take personally, but again, these were very large companies, there were banks involved, a lot of different organizations. But if you take it and you wipe it all away, just look at the numbers, which if you compare what jewelry sales were a year ago to today and take it another year back from there and analyze what's happening, things are changing. People are buying diamonds that are of a smaller carat weight. People are buying opals or rubies or emeralds of a lesser size or a different type of cut, but they're buying them, right? So things are changing and they're shifting. And to understand that more is to understand the end user and then applying it to your business. So another question, how did you find out about the latest high-end fashion or luxury items? Social media ranked higher than everyone thought, because social media really isn't about selling. It's about promotion. It's about exchange. It's more of a non-business application overall. That's why e-commerce never really worked on Pinterest or Facebook or Instagram or any of them, even though they're trying it again, because the end user wants to be more entertained and engaged than sold, right? Especially the group of Centennials and Millennials that we're addressing. Websites, company websites actually are on the uprise, where we're predicting about 22% in this survey done again this time next year, the same type of individuals. Fashion magazines was another surprise. So print, everyone thinks print is dead. Okay, I'm not going to say it's alive and kicking, but there's plenty of publications that are still around. There's plenty of newspapers that are still around for a reason. There's that tangible component of the psychographic mentality that likes to see instantly, touch and feel things that aren't digital, right? So there's an era of digital which is not considered to be as real, as active, as something that you can actually touch, right? So fashion magazines coming in almost as much as a website. Think about it. That's a pretty big number. I like to go really drill down when I go numbers. Here's another layer of this. So when we talk about fashion magazines, yes, they were the clear, but what are other percentages? What were we looking at, and how deep was the online versus print? Or I'll say print because I'll say fashion magazines equal print. A brand's website equals digital. So if we think in that mentality, looking at the breakdown on the left, we can kind of see where things are falling. And yes, it's more defined now because we're seeing the fashion websites were also involved. So people may not just be subscribing to Vogue, or maybe they're not subscribing to Vogue. Maybe they're picking it up at newsstand, but they probably went online first or after. And the stories that are online aren't always the same as what's in print, right? So the audiences are somewhat different and differentiated. Please take it upon yourself. Go to some of these sites. Go to Vogue.com. Go to Marie Claire. Go to InStyle. See what they're doing and covering in the world of jewelry. It doesn't mean you have to be a subscriber, but at least make it a point to try and look and see what the youth of America and the world are interested in and what they're being told they should be interested in. Right? Because again, this will help you with your trend analysis and forecasting and your bottom line at the end of the day. So what are they buying? In luxury, there's a propensity to shop during certain occasions, right? Graduation is a big one in the United States. Weddings are obviously a big one, not just the wedding band and ring, let's say. They already have their engagement ring, of course, but gifts for the bridal party. If you're in the bridal party, you're purchasing for other people within it, the bride and groom, etc. If you're invited to the wedding, you're buying things. And generally speaking, people are buying luxury items that aren't top-notch luxury, and we would think of like a graph, but they definitely are buying things that are of high quality because it's better representing themselves, as one millennial mentioned to me. And the other part of the percentage, you can see the breakdown, is they're looking to treat themselves. And this again is a propensity towards females, but there are plenty of males, especially in the timepiece category, that are doing so. It's good to pay attention to both. If we look at dazed dollars here, in terms of the products, and I'm going to kind of breeze past this because I want to get to more of the meat of this presentation, but at the end of the day, luxury is being aligned in a new way. And Cynthia, I have to give a lot of credit to this. When she made the comparison, the alignment of Pantone, right? The color genius, right, of the world. They create a color of the year, and suddenly that's what everyone is designing around, right? Be it household goods, fashion, accessories, whatever it might be. Clearly, there's a psychology to color. We're going to be touching on that a bit today. But the responsiveness, the emotional appeal, the human connectivity between color is so intense that it drives decision and purchasing power, right? Quality, absolutely king. And it's the number one reason why any of these millennials in this specific study were drawn to that luxury brand. Luxury names on everything from Yves Saint Laurent, Hermes, Chanel, all of these different types of luxury brands are downsizing their logo. So the bags that you're seeing women carry to the Jimmy shoes they're wearing on their feet, everything that's branded in a luxury way is actually coming down in logo size. The point size is becoming less obnoxious, we'll say, right? And this is due to the youth of America. It's not the buyers that are mandating we want to do this. It's not the brand saying, oh, we want to reduce our logo. It's the end user. You see, they don't want to be associated with or be blasting out that they're wearing Chanel. So the huge double C's on a T-shirt, things. I mean, there's always a market for something like that, but it's being reduced because quality is being looked at as a refinement, and that's important as we continue this presentation. We looked at shoppers in the U.S., the U.K., China, and Italy specifically because these were the regions that had the highest propensity of reactionary shoppers, whether they were buying for themselves or for someone else. And 105 respondents total. The captive, or the C, and whenever you see a C with a period, generally it's either a copyright or it has to do with a marketing concentration. And 30% of those luxury of those spenders were spending on luxury items. And luxury items, by the way, only in this survey were only things that had to do with fashion-based or things you could actually wear. So wearable art, jewelry, timepieces, all that were included in a big way. And by the way, this is the group 20 to 30. I think I might have said that they were upwards of 39, but that was incorrect. It was actually 20 to 30 is the span of this group of 105 people that were surveyed in this area. The luxury majority, I like to call it. Take a really good look at this graph. There's a dark blue arc, right? And there's a lighter blue segmented arc, right? That darker blue arc represents 36.8%. When the question was asked, how interested are you in high-end fashion or luxury items, as so an item that is not deemed to be a necessity, right? So jewelry, unless it's bridal, isn't considered a necessity, but it's still considered a desired item. It's still considered something that they'd buy to the tune of nearly 37%. But look, is what's more interesting. 63.2% said they were very interested. There were none of this group that said they were not interested, or they didn't see luxury as important, or they didn't see it as an investment, or they didn't see it as something that their friends and family. No, they either said, and the majority of them said, they were very interested, or they were slightly interested. And the slightly interested was a 36.8. They didn't say they were not interested. This is important. And this goes across the globe. So whether you're talking about Italy, or you're looking at China, the US, or the UK, the four concentrated geographic areas that we were surveying, or we were listening to the survey to, we didn't correct it ourselves. We were following other people's. So this is a group study, and one that I think is very important. This is a touchy subject I'm about to go into, but it's one that needs to be addressed. I call it diamonds versus diamonds. To me, it's somewhat shameful that we as an industry weren't prepared, in my opinion, for the onslaught of everything that is lab grown. I'm going to call it man-made because I don't like to call it lab grown. I don't see people in lab coats milling about, and it's more factories to me. But at the end of the day, whether you put weight into natural diamonds or man-made diamonds, or if you see, both living in market, which I do, there is a big complication that the jewelry industry is facing now that we've never faced before. For the first time ever, mined diamonds, natural diamonds, are actually competing against themselves. Because unfortunately, no one can call a man-made diamond not real. It's real. It's certified. It's sold as a diamond. It's a diamond. It may not have the type of manifestation, creation that a natural stone did. You could argue that one has more long-term value. You could argue one has more romance. You could argue a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, a certificate from any major lab and that diamond is a diamond. So it's a real diamond. And good news for those that are in the mining outfits of the world, the propensity from the younger set, and you might have heard otherwise, but believe me when I tell you, this is a very, very exhaustive amount of research to see what they were interested in and why and what size. A large percentage, you can see, were opting for and preferred natural. Now, the reasons for some of that I don't necessarily agree with. They were looking at potentially selling it down the road and things that you may not ordinarily think of things with a romance or an engagement ring when you think of a diamond. But the purchase or expecting a natural diamond or mined diamond was the biggest chunk. Those that would consider man-made diamonds, it was nearly 25% that would consider it. But there's a difference between considering it and being interested in or purchasing, right? 9.3 said they would consider all metal options. This is when we were a bunch of questions were being asked about platinum, palladium, gold, 18, 14, all the way down to 10. And even strong silver in some cases. Anyhow, so that's the overview of diamonds versus diamonds in the millennial set. More millennials than centennials. Centennials are a little too young for that yet, but they're right on the heels of millennials, and soon enough they will be. So in recap of this, millennials are more interested in and are buying natural versus man-made. They may be buying them smaller. They may be buying them in different sizes and cuts and sizes than you may be used to selling, traditionally, especially in bridal. But they are, and I'll be able to prove that to you in a moment. I love giving this example because Tiffany is absolutely at the top of their game, in my opinion, from a branding standpoint, from an elevation standpoint. They keep reinventing themselves, and they keep finding ways to take online and digital media and make it their own. So I call this slide Tiffany Triumphs, because they are now doing, for the first time, when they've been doing this, taking A-list celebrities like Lady Gaga, again, appealing to that younger set, the millennial, the centennial, right? But they're using them in ways that aren't the traditional poster child-like ad that you might see or have seen 10 years ago, 15 years ago with any celebrity and any piece of jewelry, right? And you should be following this because, again, all of this helps better understand what's happening and trending in the industry. But they're using color. Tiffany obviously has used color, and Robin's Egg Blue, I mean, it is just about to anyone in the world. There's an immediate connectivity and an emotional appeal and a type of reaction that one gets when they see a Robin's Egg Blue box without the name Tiffany associated with it, right? The brands that leverage color beyond that of jewelry, like a Roberto coin that would put, let's say, a precious stone inside of their of the shank. Vera Wang is another that's doing it. Ways of taking branded color and inherently placing it within the jewelry and a part of the jewelry brand. But a company like Tiffany's is taking it to the next level. There is, which you may or may not be familiar with, there's a very elaborate dining event. It's called the Blue Box Ball. There is a book, the Tiffany's Blue Box book. There's a lot of things that are associated with the color blue that go beyond the box. Their cafe that just opened in New York is a way to retain the consumer, to keep them in the store longer. You have to walk through, I don't even know, maybe 50 feet or so, I'd say, of fine Tiffany jewelry before you get seated to the Tiffany Cafe. And once you're in the Tiffany Cafe, you are engulfed in everything that's Robin's Egg Blue. And there's constant reminders of the jewelry, from the person that's serving you, that's wearing it, to all different touch points. It's very unique. Gucci's doing this as well. Gucci Musso, their cafes in Europe and soon to be coming into America. It's different touch points. Staying true to color. I mentioned earlier on that millennials are kind of going crazy over these new types of engagement rings, right? So it wasn't just the editor from Vogue. It's happening across country. Here's a sample of Brides Magazine that just covered colored stone engagement rings are crazy popular among millennials. They wrote it, I didn't. And what are we seeing? We're seeing a trend for individuality. We're seeing a trend for uniqueness, but we're seeing a trend on luxury. Now, these are not colored diamonds. I suppose just a rare group of millennials that would be the case, but they are colored gemstones. And let me touch on the psychology of color before I dive into some of those product points. What you're about to see, by the way, are what you should, if you're a gemstone buyer or a seller, you really want to be paying attention to this specific components of this section of this webinar, because it will help you sell better and also sell through better. Warm versus cool. Psychologically, people have been studied for, I don't even know, decades and decades over color that affects their mood, their personality, even the body temperatures of people. And it's fascinating when we're not going to go through the psychology of color. I'm not going to try to educate you on the psychology of color here, but it is important to remember that it exists, right? Psychographic, demographic. This is a regular webinar. We would be talking about how old they are, and we'd be diving right into what stones they'd be interested in and or not. But what I'm trying to do here is create an important layer that better defines the psychographic and the psychology of what makes people react the way they do. And when you start to learn about that a little bit more, it will help you again in everything you do in your business. I found it with myself. Recently, the New York Post covered a millennial bride just saying yes to unusual sparklers, as the headline read. And as you can see here, there is a wide variety. And an example of something that's a little more demi-fine is the example that Montana Sapphire that happens to be set in platinum. Of course, when royalty or anyone that is in the celebrity status anywhere in the world happens to wear something and makes it a point of displaying it. I can give you a couple examples. Years back, it was Britney Spears. I would say, but off top of mind, she's probably the. Other than that, maybe Lady Gaga a little bit, but things that are wearable, that are shown. For example, her engagement ring became incredibly popular, and the global jewelry industry reacted immediately after the press came out on the ring that she was wearing, and they created similar rings with similar stones in similar designs that were and still are incredibly popular for engagement rings. Now think about this. When have you looked on the hand of a millennial and noticed, if you can pay attention to this now, you should, that there are not round, brilliant stones. These aren't just round diamonds, 1 carat, 2 carat, 3 carat stones. These aren't halos, which were very popular 2 years ago. Still popular, but not to this extent. They're getting color and they're trending towards blue. If Cynthia was on with us now, she would tell us why. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something. You got it. So Saturn Jewels is doing it. I mean, there's a plethora of these. And these are all taken, by the way, from edit components of the knot.com, the #1 site for all things bridal, and a host of different places. The Spectrum winner on the Bridal Platinum Innovations Award and the 2018 Spectrum Awards winner, first place in bridal, as you can see here, their use in colored gemstones. And it's a wide array, by the way, of blue. They're more softer pastels to more vibrant and more tanzanite, almost purplish blues. Engagement rings that are trending are happening again all over the world, but we focused a bit more on the US. The data was easier to get for us. Southern Living, this was covered in Southern Living. Again, the story is very current, and it's engagement ring trends that people are swooning towards. So again, I'll say it, if whether you're a designer, if you're a retailer, if you're a seller of loose stones or a buyer of such, look carefully at what you're seeing here. And by the way, I'm not the person to be asking about the type of stone that really is Cynthia, and I'm sure she'd be happy to assist. But I know emeralds, rubies, some opals were definitely at the top of the hit list. The Knot actually created a section of color because so many people were asking about the color references, the spirituality connection in some respects, the emotional connection, the consumers asking. So they created a Color Diamonds and Gemstones 101. The Knot is a consumer platform that speaks to brides and brides-to-be, and in some cases, the groom and the bridal family, but mostly to the bride and the bride-to-be. And they don't arbitrarily come up with edit. They're not the #1 bridal site in the world because they just got lucky. They listen carefully to millennials. They're listening carefully to Centennials. And the questions are being asked are based on color and color gemstones. Millennials are also very concerned about the supply chain. Right? So sustainability is a top concern. And we're not just talking about explaining the Kimberley Act, to one of these millennials. They may already know about that information. They may already know about some of these groups, that are, the logos are below. What they're caring more about is the honesty and the connectivity to understand on the metal side. Really, it's mining in general, but on the metal side and on the diamond and precious gemstone side, where do these stones or metal originate from, and how can you prove this? This is going to become a much, much bigger topic of debate and criticism and interest for the industry as a whole. And again, as I said a little earlier, shame on us if we weren't prepared for this. I mean, De Beers has been working on the lab-grown side of things for decades, right? All industrial purposes, whatever they had been saying or are saying. Um, so man-made diamonds, using that as one example, are certainly not new, right? We knew this was coming. I mean, we didn't need a movie with Leo DiCaprio to tell us that there was a problem, in certain areas of the world. We didn't need a letter from the shareholders of a major corporation telling us that this is what they're going to be doing to better source or create corporate social responsibility or ethical sourcing. But it's important that you know that the millennial isn't just caring about this. They're researching it. So they're not just coming into a store with a picture of an engagement ring and all over the moon, over their future, and there's that. And then there is the serious side. Okay, so you're dealing with a higher intellect, a higher connectivity level, and not only information they're getting is accurate, by the way. The internet can be a source of confusion, as Scott Kay would say, but they are doing the research. And if you have a consumer if you have a retail store, and that consumer knows more about what they're about to purchase or hopefully going to purchase than the person that's on the opposite side of that counter, it's a problem. So better understanding and being able to validate and prove, be it yourself or through your second, third party, this is already a big deal, and it's been a big deal. It's going to become a bigger deal. And it could be a deal breaker to what actually starts to sway on the natural mind or the lab grown side. It very well could. So this is a big concern, and I felt it was important to bring up. Okay, I haven't been really keeping track of the time, but I've been obviously talking a lot, and I'm going to stop now. Thank you extreme thanks for watching, and hopefully that you've been able to glean some facts and some areas of interest that you'll be able to apply to your business and your day-to-day environment. I'm open to questions if there are any. And again, I have to say very much a big thanks to Cynthia and of course everyone at GemAtlas for hosting this, but for Cynthia for being able to contribute so much to this. And again, I hope that I'll be able to be co-hosting with her and only doing a small portion of the talking next time. If we have questions, I welcome them. If not, I suppose we can say goodbye for now. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm not hearing anyone from GemAtlas, so there may be an audio issue on my end. Perhaps there is. But I don't happen to see any questions, at least from the screen that I'm looking at. Let me just try this one. If there is anyone that has any questions and you'd like to email me, the best address is simple. It's info@danscott.com. If you have questions for Cynthia on anything you've seen or questions in general about colored gemstones or anything within jewelry and gemstones and or marketing, she really touches on all those points very well. I'll be happy to forward her email, or you can go to gemscene.com for more information and also to contact her directly.
Hi, Dan. We have got few questions from the participants. If you can open up the question panel, we would be able to take up them one by one.
Okay, I believe that it is opened. So I don't see any questions yet, but forgive me, it's my fault. I have the wrong tab open. There we go. Okay, now I can see them. Okay, so let's start out then. What are the mistakes the companies are making with branding? Oh, that's a really great question. It's a big question. I have to say that the simplest way to answer that is companies that are having issues with or complications with any form, any aspect of branding, in my opinion, the real problem is not a core issue. It's a symptom to a problem. They're not really understanding that is branding, right? So going back to what is branding, branding is the essence, it's the nuance of a product or service, it's the soul, the life, the energy of what that thing is, and the marketing is the applications, the implementation of it, bringing it to market and pricing it, positioning it, placing it within the right marketplace, testing it, analyzing it. All those functions are all marketing, but the branding component is the life of it. So I think that companies that are having issues with branding, they may not quite understand what branding is. And I'll give you a quick, it's kind of a weird comparison, but I think you'll relate to this. A human being, any human being, has a personality, right? And they have an essence of them, right? I mean, they could be a quiet individual, they could be a loud-spoken individual, but they have a certain something about them. You can take a robot, and they're doing this today. You probably have read this. They can look amazingly human, these humanoids, if you will, and they're making them better every day. But they have to implant that personality, otherwise they're just metal or whatever they're fabricated to be. An object like a pen, something that isn't alive in a traditional sense, becomes absolutely dead when it has no story, when it has no personality, when it has no brand essence to it. So again, why are companies having problems with brands? I think they just don't understand what a brand is. Really, they don't understand. They don't understand how to keep it alive or even bring it to life in the first place. The next question is, not sure if you're reading this, but oh, that's mine actually. mine note to you. Okay. The priorities may have. Oh, there we go. Okay. How do we stay updated on the latest tools and trends? Oh, this is another great question. These webinars help a lot. GemAtlas, truly, one of the more forward-thinking companies that addresses more than connectivity of businesses. That gives information is important, but you should also be subscribing to many of the online free sources. Style.com comes to mind. BuzzFeed comes to mind. These sites will help keep you in a topical frame of mind. Flipbook comes to mind. It's an app that you can highlight and segment the areas of interest. So maybe not just fashion jewelry, but a specific type of fashion jewelry, be it ladies, men's, this sort of thing, price points. And I would filter your interests as finite as possible, but I would ask you to take that interest and look at it from the why, not the how, when, not the traditional, but the why. Why would you buy it? Why would you be interested in it? And then that's what the sites that you should be going towards. So things that are of interest to you, obviously in jewelry, try to be as finite as possible, but try to lean towards those articles, stories, apps that are giving maybe more information that is catering to you and your specific needs. And that will help a lot. I mean, there's some others that page 6 of the Post, if you're in the US or you happen to read the New York Post, the trends, the style sections of leading magazines like WWD, which is Women's Wear Daily. If you're selling bridal or have an interest or propensity in selling bridal, you not only want to be looking at the ad models, who's the cover 2, page 1, who's the back cover of Brides magazine, who's on the not.com, who's being featured, and why. So whatever your area of interest is within fine jewelry and watches, I would take it to the consumer level and try to absorb yourself as if you're in that mindset, because in doing so, you'll better understand, in my opinion, what you should be buying and so on. Okay. The priorities may have shifted. The priorities may have shifted. What would they be on Centennials? Yes, the priorities have shifted. Good point. Centennials are very skeptical. Centennials are the people that are why FedEx and Apple and Sony and American Airlines are changing their game plan. Those companies and more are moving away from the National Rifle Association. You know why? All right. It was Centennials that spoke up to the world that said, enough, enough. We cannot have any more school shootings, and doing things like lobbying to Congress and speaking at the White House and doing more to get major Fortune 500 companies to change the way they're doing business, because they realize if they don't, they're not going to have that customer. And that customer is the wave of tomorrow. So it's a great point that you bring up here. The priorities have shifted because this is a life experience, right? I mean, God forbid you know anyone that's been wounded or worse from any type of horrific act. But when it happens in mass, and it happens to this group specifically, or it involves them in a direct touch point, their priorities shift. And those priorities affect business, and they affect the economy, and they affect products and services, and how major corporations are dealing with that, right? So their priorities shift to much more of a humanitarian standpoint, more of a caring standpoint, I believe. Yeah, so hopefully that addresses that question. Okay, so these are all great questions. According to the future of the industry with regards to Centennials, yes, not many are focusing on their needs and demands are changing accordingly. Okay, let me see if I've got that. Okay, yeah, okay, so these are all, I think, very, very strong questions, because they're not just asking about the nuts and bolts of the psychographic, they're drilling down more into how that's going to be affecting the industry. Centennials are more cynical. They're more apt to do everything online. I mean, they reach into their pocket, or they already have in their hand, their best friend. Their cell phone is their lifeline to really everything. I'll give you here's an interesting psychological point. There's a new name, and they haven't come up with the name yet, but psychologists and psychiatrists in the U.S. are trying to define this name. It's the ghost ring, or the ghost vibration. So it's when you think you heard your phone ring, or you think you felt your phone vibrate, be in your pocket, if you're a woman, in your purse, whatnot, but it didn't. Right? And the reason I'm bringing this up is that there's been such a conditioning of that is digital, and inherent connectivity of mobile technology to this user base, and many other psychographic platforms in different age groups. But they're taking this to bed with them. They're waking up. It's going everywhere. They're putting them in plastic bags or things in the shower, for goodness sakes. They do not really, it's like a part of them. And sometimes soon it may actually be, hopefully not, but it could be physically a part of them. They are very devoted to this online friend, and the information that's given is not always accurate. Right? Let's just face it. We try to be as accurate as possible through a multitude of means, but Wikipedia isn't always correct, and the Google search does not always bring you to the best possible source on page 1 or 2. But this group, Centennials specifically, are not just in love with it, they are devoted to it. It is a part of them. It's an extension of their being. So they cannot really function without it. When they hear that ghost ring or that ghost vibration and realize that it didn't actually occur, there's a great sadness that is actually, this is where the word they're trying to think of in the psychology world, in psychologist world and psychiatric world, over what exactly is this that they're feeling. Why is there this dependency? Well, they grew up with it. It's just part of them. So everything that has to do with digital and the interface between that are apps and the different forms of communication with the Centennial are critical to not only help understand, but to be a part of. Okay, and I wrote a story for Jury Business, a Canadian publication, on this, and it comes to mind that this might help as well. If you can, take a day out of the month, take several days if possible, and take a millennial out to lunch. Take a Centennial out to lunch. Hopefully not someone that you're related to, because you're going to get, obviously, answers to your questions that may be a bit tainted or one-sided, but someone that you work with. They've got, a son or daughter that happens to be, a teenager, 17, 18, 19, whatnot, and they've got some level of disposable income. They're obviously interested in shopping in certain ways. Watch them. Let that be your own personal focus group for an afternoon, for a lunch, an extended lunch. See what happens with them, and you'll be amazed, I think, at how they shop and why they shop as they do. It's fascinating to watch, and it becomes incredibly educational. Okay, I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions. What would Centennial spending interest in the gem world? Okay, so this is another Cynthia, because it's a great question on what are Centennials buying in the world of gemstones. I know that their interest and their purchasing is in smaller diamonds, white diamonds that are natural, mined, rubies, emeralds, some opals. Your short answer to this is to look at a few key baby brands that are up and coming. Wake comes to mind, WWAKE. I definitely would look up Wake. I would look at J. Crew, even though they're not exactly top of mind for jewelry. I don't like to reference them, actually, but you know what? They're doing a big push for demi-fine, and I'd look at their designs and the stones they're selecting. I would go to Saks.com, which is the #1 resale store for Saks, by the way. Of all the different Saks brick and mortar stores, Saks.com is the #1 store. They call it a store. It is a store of all their stores. Saks.com recently added demi-fine. Go to the navigation, go to jewelry, go to demi-fine, and see what are they offering, what gemstones are they offering, and they're doing the math, and they're seeing obviously what's working, what's not on the purchasing behavior and the aspiration. So if a Centennial doesn't quite have the money for a specific piece of jewelry, these are the children in the Toy Story. They're tugging on their mother or father's jacket if you're a child with wanting a toy, and so they're not actually making the purchase, but they're in essence they're making the purchase. They're convincing the person that has the funds to do so, that that they deeply want it, and they traditionally get it with enough attention, as you probably would know if you have any children. And that's what Centennials are doing. So if they don't have the purchasing power to purchase $1,000 or a $1,500 item, they're absolutely aspiring to it. But this is important. They're not buying the knockoff. This is not the majority of which. I'm talking in grand terms here, in more Mountain View terms, but they're not buying the knockoffs. They're not buying the simulated stones. They're wanting to, and they're agreeing to save for or aspire to it, and that's important. But I would look at certain brands. Wake again comes to mind, and that's a really good one. And Style.com I would also recommend looking at them. But go to sites. Go to Neiman's. Go to Saks.com. Look at what they're doing with demi-fine. Google demi-fine. There's a Facebook page for demi-fine. It's got tons of information. I'm happy to provide that to anybody that would like it. And let's see. There's a few more questions, and then I feel that I've overstayed my welcome. What are the mistakes that companies? We've already covered that one. I think I might have actually covered the questions. The alternative to branding for, okay, here's one that was new. The alternative to branding for small business. What an interesting question. The alternative to branding for small business. Is there an alternative to brand? Well, I guess what the individual is saying is a small business, they don't have the funds or the wherewithal, or maybe not even the interest to brand is something in the large editorial sense that we think of when we think of a brand, right? I'm here to offer you something. Don't think that you have to outspend someone, or that you have to out-media someone to create a brand. Brand should be a natural manifestation of something. If something is worth it, if you're a small business, no matter how small, you could be an entrepreneur, and you could be, I'll use a loose stone individual that maybe is repping a bunch of lines, or maybe they have their own line, whatever it might be. They're one person. If that person doesn't have a brand essence, it goes back to the humanoid that we described earlier, right? The non-human, looks human, acts human, seems human, but they don't have that personality. They don't have that aura, if you will, that energy about them, that it makes them lifeless, right? And that person probably won't produce as many sales as the exact same person, sole entrepreneur, selling the same exact stones in the same geographic area, at the same price points, But if they have a way in which they're identifying themselves to others and presenting themselves and storytelling, then that is their brand. We all have a brand, whether you want to call it, our soul or our essence or our personality, our vibration, our energy, call it whatever you want to call it. In marketing terms, I call it a brand, and we all have our own brand. So even if you are a one-person operation, the smallest business possible, you do have a brand, and you don't have to create all of these extra frills and layers of a national campaign. If you're a designer and you're thinking, you have to compete against David Yurman, well, might as well just get out of the business. I mean, you're not going to be able to compete with that kind of buying power and resonance that Yurman has. However, David Yurman started out as an individual, just like Scott Kay, just like Donna Karan, just like any designer, right? Or anyone, or any politician. Think it applies in any different vertical. If you're able to take that essence and that brand component, if it's natural, if it's real, if it's genuine, and it has lasting power, if you have a point of differentiation that's unusual, that makes sense to that market, then I would exploit that. So to answer your question in a very long way, you do have a brand, and you should not be moving away from a brand, because then you're moving away from your essence, the key elements that make up that of you as a person, or that in which you're selling. Okay, we'll see one more question, if there is one more. Okay, that one we covered. I think this one is new. Okay, the question is, what according to me is the future to the industry with regards to Centennials? I know we did address this. Forgive me, I'm batting around here a bit. Oh, okay, here, the last one. This is a good one to close with. It's apropos. What is the differentiation between a Centennial and a Millennial? Great way to end this. If you were talking to a person that just went to school for marketing and lived and died by marketing books, that individual would probably tell you its age range, right? Because that's the first identifiable component that makes up a Centennial and a Millennial in most people's mind. Because, I mean, that's just kind of what they relate to. But think again, psychographics, not demographics. Demographics list all of the points of age, location, income, whether they're male or female, whether they have a cat or a dog. These are the demographic profiles. They're important particles within the nuclei, but the main component, the nucleus of that individual, be it Centennial or Millennial, is on the type of individual and why they're doing what they're doing. So the difference between a Centennial and a Millennial is really based on personality sets and what they're prone to be interested in. Centennials are going to be much more technology savvy, much more so than you might think Millennials are, have the upper hand in technology. Well, there's plenty of apps and plenty of things that are coming right around the corner, and some that are already here. The Centennials know much better. Before you know it, the Millennials, especially the ones that are going to turn 40 in about 4 to 5 years, are going to be looking at the Centennials like, what's wrong with these kids? It's going to come out of their mouth. Apps and technology, as it advances, is quicker and becomes more pliable, and becomes more readily available to the younger set, being the Centennials. They're going to be mastering things and advancing on their own. Artificial intelligence, all these different things that are coming. So digital in the personality section of Centennials is critical, reaching them in a way that makes sense, but not being cold, right? This is a piece of metal and plastic and glass, and they know that. The more social touch points, like they're doing in India now with the try-on of jewelry and that sort of thing, it starts here, but it doesn't always end here. They're delivering the jewelry to the individual that they started here. That's the Centennial. The Millennial has this in their pocket, and they're looking at a company's website as they're walking to the store, or they're shopping online only, and then they're being inspired by something that they saw, be it on an outdoor ad or a television commercial or somewhere on online, or a physical presence. They're still more in touch with with people and clearly digitally savvy, but not to the level of Centennial. So it's not age, it's personality sectors and also interest levels and how they're adapting to the world around them. But please don't think that these are screen agers, right? These are not just people that are interested in it rules their life. I'm here to tell you again, but they realize that anything that's connected to this started and ended with a live person, and that's the brilliance of the Centennial market. Even more so than millennials, because they've already got that they're in touch with people one to one a little bit more so. But Centennials definitely are starting and not necessarily ending here. Millennials are sometimes starting and ending here. Maybe that helps the picture. Thank you again very much for watching and for your questions. This has really been more of a monologue than a dialogue up until the end, and I very much appreciate the questions and the time. And if you do have any additional questions or concerns or just ideas, I'm wide open to them. And thank you again to GemAtlas, a tremendous group, and very much look forward to working hopefully with Cynthia in the future.
Thank you so much, Dan, for having this very wonderful and informative webinar for us today. On behalf of the entire team of GemAtlas and the audiences, I would like to thank you for sparing some time for us today and sharing this knowledge with us. I'm sure this will definitely help us and the entire industry to now focus on the right group and accordingly change the designs, change the trends, and have more business for their industry. With this, we are good to close the webinar. Thank you everybody for attending this webinar. Still, in case if you have any questions, you can drop us an email and we would be very happy to answer them. We are now ending the session. Thank you everybody.